Hey guys, it's Matt Hanham here and welcome to the Amplify Your Business podcast. Okay, Matt Hanham back here, and this is the Amplify Your Business podcast. And today, or this evening, I've got Jackson Millan.
That's me.
From the Yellow Brick Road / Wealth Mentor.
How you doing, mate?
I'm doing very good, and thanks very much for jumping on board. So my final one of the Game Changer Lombok series, which I'm going to be pumping out.
Lucky last.
Lucky last. Save the best.
Yeah,
for last,
best for last,
you know?
as they say.
Here we are. That's it. So yeah, welcome, mate. Welcome.
Thanks, mate.
Awesome. So the big question really is, who are you and what do you do?
Fantastic. All right, good question. So I run a number of wealth businesses, and our value proposition is really empowering our clients to clearly define what's really important to them, both in their lifestyle and financially, in order to implement the right strategies over the right length of time in order to achieve peace of mind and certainty around their financial future.
Okay. Let's just break that down a little bit, hey? Let's just, because I mean, I get it. I sort of know what you're talking about. Let's just, in a nutshell, I mean, you're really securing futures, right? I mean, how would you put it in a sort of simpler form?
I'm a financial tour guide.
Financial tour guide. I like that. That's a good approach.
The way I see it is that most people go through life not having an ultimate destination, right? It's kind of one thing to the next. Yeah. And if we use this as kind of an analogy of when was the last time you jumped in your car without a destination in mind? Yeah. Even if you went on a bit of a joyride, you always had the intention to come back home, right? So without knowing the destination of where you're going to, then how do you know what vehicle you need to get in or how much fuel you've got to put in the tank? So we try and apply these types of, I guess, methodologies or ways of thinking to finance and wealth management to help our clients really paint a path of what they're actually ultimately trying to achieve in terms of their wealth position, and then how can we then put the right strategies into place to help them achieve those things.
So just listening to that and people, I think, are immediately going to assume something like that sounds really expensive, but I think the point is it's probably expensive or incredibly expensive if you don't think about it, right?
Correct. I think that, look, as a developed country, we're one of the most under-advised developed countries in the world.
Really?
I think the last stat that I saw was less than 10% of the Australian population actively seeks advice. Right. And most of those advice relationships are transactional in nature, like an insurance policy here or a superannuation fund there. Yeah. And very few clients actually know that we exist. Yeah. And I guess we're further niche, even once again, than what most advisors do.
Okay. So, paint me the picture sort of chronologically. How do you end up running this business or these multiple businesses in the wealth space? Like, what does your career look like moving through to there?
Look, funnily enough, all through my childhood, I wanted to be a vet.
A vet?
My parents told me stories of when I was a kid. One of my first words was vet, and then I just never got it out of my head. I always wanted to work with animals, and I guess what little did I know that you need to get such high marks in high school in order to become a vet. I think it's the last time I checked, like 98 UAI.
Didn't quite apply yourself then?
No, well, look, I think that nobody gave me the roadmap that I needed to get to where I wanted to go. Okay. And I think that these kind of principles that I teach my clients have kind of run true throughout my entire life. So ultimately, when I found out that I hadn't applied myself enough to get on that trajectory to get into veterinary science, I figured, what am I going to do with my life? So I started doing telesales as soon as I left high school. And I was in a business called the Financial Advice Centre. And really it was just a pretty name for selling insurance to Westpac customers. But through that exercise, I saw these guys that were giving advice, not in our team, of course, in another team, and helping their clients obviously implement strategies and achieve some level of financial freedom. So I went and enrolled in my diploma, and I became an advisor at the age of 19 after lots of door knocking and basically didn't take no for an answer.
So you knew what you wanted?
Look, I think that my old man always told me from when I was a kid that if you want to make money, you've got to work with money. Okay. So I always had this idea of, okay, well, if I want to work with money, I've got to be in finance. But I understood that my family had never got good advice. And I really wanted to go out there and try and help people like my parents get the right advice so they can make informed and educated financial decisions to make the most out of what they had.
See, telesales, that sort of space is very interesting to me, and I think it's an incredible opportunity. I think most people look at it as a really terrible place to start.
Oh, it was fantastic.
Yet there's some amazing, certainly if you want to start your own business and be an entrepreneur, getting that, I'm assuming, more comfort around being told no a lot more often is probably quite a profound and powerful piece of experience to have gone through.
Yeah, look, we were on an auto dialer making over 100 calls a day. The job actually suited my lifestyle very well. We started at 12 and worked until 8 on a dialer all day. And it was a kind of a really high energy environment where as soon as you made a sale, there'd be bells ringing and people clapping and woohooing. And it really kind of taught me that resilience of, look, some will, some won't, but who cares? You kind of got to push on.
Yeah. Excellent. So you've sort of knocked your way in, you've pushed hard, you're now working for someone else sort of in the wealth space. At what point did you say, you know what, it's time? What was the sort of catalyst for the change and starting on your own? Yeah,
look, I think it was another life lesson that my dad always taught me. Is he said, look, you've always got to give your employer 2 years. And as long as you enjoy what you do and you're learning from it and you're growing from it, then you give them 2 years of your life. And in exchange for that 2 years, they give you the experience and the credibility to move on to the next role. So I continued to do that, and I went from a number of companies to the big banks, and kind of just tried to hone my craft and kind of learn how the industry was run. And throughout that entire time, I just saw there was a lot of flaws in the system. There's a lot of people out there that were just doing advice the complete wrong way. And more so, I found that the relationship was more dictated by the advisor's ego and what they understood that their clients wanted, not necessarily understanding what was truly important to the clients. Right. So that ultimately led me to being in a position where I wanted to start my own business.
Great. So how did you first make revenue? I mean, how did you jump out? Like, what was the structure? How did you sort of make that happen?
Look, I think in terms of moving into my business?
Yeah, we start businesses, right?
Yeah, sure.
But when we start them, we actually usually just spend money.
Yeah.
And then at some point we have to start actually bringing some back in.
Correct.
And how did you sort of go about creating that first part of your book of clients and get things moving?
Look, I was pretty lucky. So within Yellow Brick Road, I've got 2 business partners that had been within Yellow Brick Road for about 8 years.
Okay.
And they'd run a very successful mortgage business, but it had a lot of issues trying to create a holistic wealth business that was kind of in line with the whole business value proposition.
Okay.
And they'd churned through a number of advisors that were just really doing transactional work off the back of them doing a home loan for a client.
Yep.
Which was very similar to what the rest of the industry was doing.
Yeah.
A simple insurance policy here, a superannuation fund there, and they really understood that there was a big hole in their business. So they actually headhunted me on LinkedIn, and I basically met with them, got a feel for what they were all about, and then basically said to them, look guys, if you want this to work, you need to give me full control of the wealth side of the business and let me run it my way. And I'm very lucky that they gave me that opportunity. And with that, they also gave me a debit credit facility, which helped me kind of get through the first 6 months.
Right, okay.
And then we've now, in the last 18 months, got to a position of being the #1 wealth and overall branch in the country.
Yeah, fantastic. So #1 wealth and branch in the country. How does, what sort of mindset, what did it take for you to sort of launch yourselves into that position and really, outperform the rest of the country? I mean, there's obviously something you're doing differently.
Yeah, look, I think with any business, you need to understand your customer. It kind of comes down to a basic SWOT analysis, right? Mm-hmm. That if you can apply a SWOT analysis to any business and understand your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats, and understand which ones have an internal focus of what are your strengths and weaknesses as an individual or as a business, and then look at the threats and opportunities in your external environment, then you can create a meaningful value proposition that resonates with the customers that you want to deal with. And as such, I went through that exercise to understand, well, what are the kind of pain points for the customers that we're dealing with our brokers? And then how could I create a seamless transition between that broker relationship, which is primarily a transactional one-off relationship, into a holistic, high-touch, ongoing service, accountability-based relationship that was really about helping these clients fulfill a greater purpose or a greater need.
Yeah, okay.
And by doing that really allowed us to craft out our niche that was specific to our business, as opposed to trying to have this one-size-fits-all cookie-cutter approach that you do get with a lot of big businesses, whether it be a big corporate enterprise or a franchise.
Yeah, so look, when you're trying to break out and do something a little bit different like that, clearly you're going to come up with challenges.
Sure.
So what's maybe a big challenge that you had to overcome, sort of going through that process, to taking yourselves to the top? Because you're obviously aiming for the top. Let's do
Correct.
this differently. What did you come up with, and how did you get over that?
Look, I think with any time that you're working within a business structure, or a big business structure, there's always the bureaucracy of big business that you need to navigate.
Yeah.
And I think that having the experience of working in corporate previously and working with the big banks, I had an understanding of how to go about that in a way that allowed me to get objective outcomes.
Yeah. There's a process, right? There's a way they move.
Exactly.
And you can't fight that. You need to navigate.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
So by navigating that, I was able to get the room to move and do the things that I wanted to do.
Great.
And drive these initiatives. I guess I'm quite lucky that Yellow Brick Road as a business is quite contemporary.
Yeah.
Mark Bouris as an industry thought leader has always wanted to try and push the pace in terms of these kind of wealth solutions. So I've been given the opportunity to kind of be the front runner of a lot of these initiatives. And through that I've crafted my own advice process that's really allowed me to take it to the top.
Okay, fantastic. So what's some of the best advice you received, whether it was leading yourself into making those changes or otherwise in growing the business?
Look, I think the best advice I've ever received has always come from my old man.
Yeah.
And my old man, something that's always resonated with me is that whatever you can perceive, you can conceive. So I think that with that always in mind, I've always thought that if I had an idea in my head, as long as I applied myself, I could do it. And I think that you've got to make a habit of being successful. Success breeds success. And even down to the kind of little things, that if you make a small promise to yourself, you always want to make sure that you go through with that. And as such, you try to condition yourself and you get yourself into that habit of always living up to your own promises. It's where you start making excuses for yourself when you've said, oh, I'm going to do this, and then ultimately say, oh no, I don't think I'll do that, it's too hard, or it's going to take too much of my time or too many resources, that you get into this habit of doing the opposite. And I've always tried to avoid that.
That's great. So I mean, extreme discipline is what I'm hearing. And when you're making those promises or suggesting you're going to do that, and then you need to follow through. And I guess that's what you're bringing to your clients as well.
Correct. It's about taking action.
Which is helping you get to that position and giving yourself incredible results.
Yeah, correct. Look,
results.
You don't need to do anything sexy in life. Life is about tried and true.
Yeah.
And it's the catalyst to all of this is taking action, and it's consistent and sustainable action that you take on a regular and ongoing basis. In my business and what I preach to my clients is really three very simple concepts. It needs to be simple, it needs to be sustainable, and it needs to be scalable. If it doesn't tick those three things, there's no point doing it. So that's kind of the metrics that I always set for myself when I go to make a decision or when I make a recommendation to my clients.
I love it. So let's change the pace a little bit.
Sure.
What's something that people not in a professional sense, like family and friends, what's something that they would know about that maybe the rest of us, if we Googled you up, might not figure out?
Look, I've been training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for the past 7 years or so.
Okay.
So I've got to level of blue belt, and I used to compete at an Asia Pacific level.
Fantastic.
I guess, look, I'm kind of swallowing my words here, but I have made excuses for myself in terms of my training. So I've fallen off the bandwagon a little bit over the last few months, but
although I'm guessing there's a lot of discipline involved.
There's a lot of discipline, look, but I'm actually heading on a trip to Brazil shortly, so I'll be planning to train a fair bit whilst I'm over there to get back on the competition circuit. So,
fantastic. And what will that give you, like training in Brazil? I mean, that's obviously going to be an experience like no other.
Yeah, look, I've done it before, and it's one of those things. It's kind of it's where it all come from, and it's just it's not that they do anything different. It's coming back to really those similar principles. They stick to the tried and true. Okay. They stick to the fundamentals, and they're just so good at them. So it'll help me really hone my game, which will be good. Fantastic.
No, that's brilliant. So I wanted to just switch gear, and discipline's a big part of the next movement. And so do you have any morning routines and rituals, and sort of how do you structure that week? Because clearly you're quite disciplined in your approach. How do you build your week out, and how do you start your day, and what do you use to sort of help yourself be the best entrepreneur you can?
Look, I'm very different to a lot of others, where I try and leave the least amount of time as possible to get what I need to get done.
Okay.
I'm a big believer that you will always make best use of the time that you have available. And as such, I wake up 20 minutes before I need to get to the office. I try and leave the office as early as I possibly can, and I don't work on Fridays, and I take 3 months off on holidays a year. And with that, I'm not the only one that's doing this. I've got the initiative that all of my team don't work on Fridays either. The only caveat to that is on a Thursday they need to do a self-assessment, and they really need to ask themselves honestly, have they helped push the needle forward in terms of the growth of the business for the week? And if they feel they've done so, then they can take the Friday off. And we spend the first half of Friday morning going through kind of personal and professional development, and then they take the afternoon off and spend it as they wish.
Fantastic. So have you had any challenges with that? Or look, I mean, of course, there's a teething process, but how have you found that approach, and how did your team react to that?
Look, I think I've got a fantastic team, and I've really tried to breed initiative into my team, and make sure that they're accountable to what they're contributing to the business, and that I don't ultimately become the bottleneck. And as such, I guess that level of accountability is there, that if they do their self-assessment on a Thursday, there's been a couple of instances where the staff have said, I haven't quite done enough this week, so therefore I'm going to catch up on my calls on a Friday, or hang around and write some processes or whatever it might be. So it's good that they respect the process, and they respect that I've given them the opportunity to show that level of initiative, and they don't abuse it, which is fantastic.
Cool. So how do you manage sort of customer service during that time frame?
Look, I think your customers will always, I guess, be led by you as a professional. There's nothing that is so time critical that a client has to get in contact with you via email on Friday. All of my customers have my direct mobile number, and I haven't had one call yet. So I've even got an autoresponder on my emails that says that I only check my emails twice a day for 30 minutes. And if they want to get in contact with me, then they can, or they can get in contact with someone in my team. And look, at the end of the day, given the way that we've tried to condition our clients with those three principles, there's nothing that has a sense of that much urgency that they need to act on. If there is, it means that they're most likely deviating from the course that we've already defined for them. So therefore, these things are in place to try and protect them.
It's really great. I mean, because I hear these types of things a lot, but it sounds like you've really got the discipline nailed, that, and it's working for you. Whereas I see a lot of people trying to implement these types of activities and struggling, because I think you really have to like hold firm on your position. And you're right, like there's no need. There's very rarely going to be a need for that to happen on a Friday or a Friday afternoon. And if there was, they can get hold of you. Exactly there's a way, and most, like 99 or 999 times out of 1,000, it's probably not necessary.
Exactly right. Look, I think that particularly when we're talking about wealth creation, that if we look at like the best investors in the world, like Warren Buffett and Ray Dalio, like these guys are long-term accumulators of assets, and they're not trading the market. So what are the things that your clients are going to get in contact with you, or the market corrects a couple of % or something happens, right? Fridays are notorious for the market correcting, right? So the last thing that you want them to be doing is trying to play around with their portfolio. I guess one of my mentors, one of the sayings that he's always told me is, he goes, play with your wife, not with your portfolio. So it's just one of those things, you set and forget it, you stick the course. And sticking the course will ensure that you've got the maximum probability of getting to your destination.
Right. You've raised a couple of questions, but the first one I'm going to roll back.
Sure.
The 30-minute email thing sounds a little bit like a Tim Ferriss
4-hour workweek
initiative. How challenging was that to make that happen?
Not challenging at all.
No?
I had a number of clients actually commend me for it and wish that they could do it themselves, but unfortunately, being in a corporate environment, they don't have the flexibility to do it like I do. So
you rolled straight in, one day you decided, and exactly. It's just happened ever since?
Look, I was spending a lot of my day in my mailbox. I was getting over 100 emails a day, and a lot of them just could have been solved with either referring it on to another staff member or a little bit of initiative. It's just that people were being lazy, and they saw me as the path of least resistance. So by doing that, I've been able to reduce the amount of time I spend in in my mailbox pretty substantially.
Yep.
So I'm trying to spend only about an hour a day.
Yeah, fantastic.
And I hopefully want to try and follow, take a page out of Tim's book and push that out as far as I can.
Yeah, so is someone else in your inbox, or
No.
You still fully manage it?
I still fully manage it.
Are able to chunk it into some quality.
Exactly right.
Yeah, it's a quality small time frames. So it's pretty amazing. I've had that challenge. That's a challenge I've tried to work with, and I guess I haven't built myself little structures and systems to get myself. Somehow I find myself back in there, and it's going.
Sure.
I mean, I've done things even like setting up manual checking of emails on the phone and things like that, because I've decided I still want them on there, and that's a pretty positive thing, not having things pinging at you all the time, and it's a good start, but it's certainly nowhere near the discipline that you've created there.
Yeah, look, it's one of these things that I guess you've constantly got to try and push the pace and get yourself out of your comfort zone. Because if you stick to the status quo, then there's no growth trajectory, or if there is growth, that it's relatively small.
Yeah.
So I've always tried to make a habit that once I get comfortable,
Yep.
I take the next step. And it can be very uncomfortable sometimes. Like sometimes I panic a little bit and go, oh, what have I done? And there's always that voice in the back of your head that tells you shouldn't be doing these things.
Yeah.
But you just got to endure. And if you endure, then you just go, in hindsight, this is a great decision. So.
Yeah. Excellent. No, that's really cool. So rolling into wealth a little bit, you mentioned sort of Ray Dalio and talked to that. He's probably made a little bit more famous by some people just in a personal development space, because he's been interviewed a couple of times recently, and Tony Robbins has been pushing him out there, and a few other things, which is pretty cool, and I think useful, because I don't think small business owners and that are necessarily out looking for people like Ray Dalio and others and their advice. And I've read his document with the principles, and which I'm sure you're familiar with, and it's some pretty interesting advice. So if I just clearly not advice, but to a layman small business owner, what's a couple of things sort of in the wealth space that they should really be starting to consider, even though they might think, oh, it's early in days, I'm hustling right now. Like what should they be thinking about?
Look, coming back to that vehicle analogy, right? Yeah. That your investment portfolio, your home, your investment properties, your superannuation, and very much your business are just vehicles that are ultimately guiding you towards a destination, right? So you need to treat it as such. Most people view their business as the destination itself, and they put all of their blood, sweat and tears into that business because they're passionate about it. They're involved in it every day. They're playing an active role in its development and its growth. But at the end of the day, although they get a lot of fulfillment out of their business, it's still a vehicle for them to derive personal benefit, right?
Yeah.
So it's ultimately about defining, well, what do you want to achieve, or what does your business allow you to achieve personally, and ensure that you have a roadmap in place that allows you to set that trajectory, just not to put everything back into your business.
Right.
I've seen business owners time and time again just reinvest and not nourish themselves by taking a salary or taking dividends because they feel guilty and they pay themselves last. I've always tried to make a habit of that. When I set myself up with a salary, every 6 months I review it and I increase it. And I look at who are the people that I can benchmark myself against in the industry in terms of my skill set and my contribution and the amount of time and effort that I put into building my business, and how much do those people earn.
Yeah.
So that allows me to set a kind of target that I can work towards to derive personal benefit from that. Look, at the end of the day, cash flow is king. And what most people overlook is that you don't get rich from your earned income. It's how you use that earned income in order to invest and allow compounding to work its magic. So those are some principles to consider.
Yeah, I mean, just a story that popped into mind when you said that, and I remember being at a conference at some stage, and it was a property related conference, and there was a guy sitting next to me, and sort of had the chat, what do you do? And at the time I was in a corporate job. I was young, but earning some good money, but I think I was in my early 20s, to be honest, at the time. So certainly hadn't built up much behind me, but this guy was a postie.
Yeah, okay.
Postie. I think at the time it was talking something like a $40,000 salary, not much, family, the whole lot. And he had 6 or 7 properties that he somehow just gradually tapped, knew his numbers really well because he had a small income. He knew exactly where and what he had to do and had a sort of slow growth strategy. And I think he was probably close to 50 and he'd been doing it for a little while, but he hadn't earned a big income.
No.
Through his whole career. He was quite happy, quite peaceful, quite enjoyed what he did out there on the road, but had amass the wealth that I see many people in corporate spaces earning multi-hundreds of thousands of dollars don't get anywhere near.
Exactly
and
right.
He was able to do that with, you know, quite a small amount of money, and obviously have a, you know, be in a great place with his family, and they had a family home there, but they'd initially sort of focused elsewhere. I just thought that was an amazing story, and certainly where you're going there a little bit with, you know, how you utilize what comes in the door, because it's true in personal finances, but certainly business too, right?
Correct. Look, I think it's the cornerstone to everything is surplus. It's like the surplus you have in your business is your profit, and that gives you the freedom to be able to reinvest in your business or take a dividend, right? And then when you look at your own self personally, it's what surplus do you have after you've paid for all your fixed costs, you've paid your mortgage, you've taken care of your family, you've lived your lifestyle, you've gone overseas on holiday, how much do you have left? And it's about what do you use that for? And in that example, that guy would have had very good use of his capacity to create surplus.
Yeah.
And he's used that surplus wisely to invest and allow compounding to work its magic. And it's as simple as, are you willing to defer the gratification of your financial decisions today for future gratification of those decisions in the future?
Yeah. It's ironic, isn't it? Because it's emotional about a very practical situation.
Correct.
You actually have to make that, like, sort of, you do have to defer, you know, that gratification. It's something that I see, you know, certainly as society, it seems to get worse and worse credit. The way we're exploding in that space, where it's just getting faster and faster, and expecting more and more, and tap and go. And you haven't got kids,
no, not yet.
I'm in the kids space, and I'm starting to see my kids even at school, and the interaction of you kind of go back to school once you get kids in school, and it's pretty amazing. You know, and I wouldn't call it wealth. It's spent money, and they may be very wealthy, but there's a lot of people out there spending a lot of money on cars, and you have to ask the question. I mean, as just one example in the process, does that $80,000 car do enough for them, and is it necessary, and where does it? And it just as one, you know, sort of micro example. I'm sure you see plenty of it.
Well, yeah, I was watching an interview with Shaquille O'Neal the other day, and he said the best advice he ever got was from one of his first mentors around money. And he said, if it appreciates, you buy it, and if it depreciates, you lease it.
Yeah.
And it's kind of these concepts, and look, I think it all goes back to school, right? That we don't learn this financial literacy in our school. I remember, like, in high school, that they were talking to us about credit cards, but they never talked to us about investments.
No.
They never talked to us about the process of buying a house. They talked to us about, okay, how do you get a loan to buy a car?
Yeah.
And it's all of these kind of these things that they're ingraining in us to become consumers, not owners. And it's not until I've got to this point really now that I've been able to learn all this stuff. And if it's taken me this long, then how long is it going to take everyone else?
Yeah, a long time. So, just pulling back to business, just briefly before we wrap up shortly, how have you sort of grown your business? How do you market? Yeah, and how you've clearly marketed well, and obviously delivered well, but you've marketed well to get yourself on the top of this entire network of businesses in your company. How do you have you done that, and what have you done differently?
Look, I think that once again I was lucky that I had the opportunity of that existing mortgage business, and those mortgage clients had really high touch relationships with my business partners. So it allowed me the permission to go in and have really in-depth, valuable conversations with these people and educate them around the things that they didn't understand yet or hadn't quite considered. And as such, I guess that kind of organic growth set us up with that foundation. And as such, I've tried to nurture those clients to really value our service and talk about us. Most advisors really touch base with their clients once a year if they're lucky. We speak to our clients probably once a month, once every 2 months.
Right.
And because we have this dynamic, I guess, on track and accountability-based process, we're always top of mind for our clients. So therefore, they're always talking about us. So referral is a massive part of our business.
Okay.
We're at a point now where the team is at a pretty substantial size that we need to start looking at how we can, I guess, continue to keep enough lead flow or new clients coming in to sustain our growth trajectory. So that's going to come down to kind of acquiring other businesses with kind of low engagement clients and really trying to offer them this high value service.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's really interesting, and another method for growth. The acquisition, which certainly a lot of conversations I've had so far hasn't really come up. But once you get yourself in a particular situation, and certainly I've tried and looked at many businesses to buy and often haven't pulled the trigger because there just isn't enough of a value proposition, because a lot of people are very attached to their businesses. Correct. And they want to sell them for top dollar. But if you've got a particular value proposition and a system on the way you go about it, you can buy something at market value even and know that you can do so much more with Correct. It. And I mean, you wouldn't want to pay market value, sure. So to speak, but at the same time, you know that you've got a value add and you've got exactly some systems and operations that you can really like leverage off that and create, much more growth in your business. So that's
I think amazing. That a lot of these traditional advice clients are just frustrated with the relationship they've had to date. Yep. So it gives us a tremendous opportunity to go and show just sharp contrast to that, and hopefully be able to add a lot of value.
Okay. So what's one piece of advice that you would give to a small business owner listening to on how that wanted to grow and amplify their business?
Look, I think holding yourself accountable to taking action, and more so taking action on your business, not in it. You need to understand the transition from a technician, and most people enter business as a technician, that you understand that you're good at what you do, or you have the capacity to be good at what you do, and you devote everything that you have and all your heart and soul into becoming the master of your craft. But then the hardest part is letting go of that, because you're no longer, if you transition to the manager stage, you're no longer in that direct scenario where you're getting the gratification of helping others. You need to get over that kind of hurdle of teaching others to pursue providing that gratification and those outcomes to their clients. So I think that as soon as you can get that technician part right, and then start making that transition to manager and coaching others to be as good as or better than you, the easier your journey will be.
So hard, isn't it? Because sometimes you see people that have been there for a decade and they can't break through that. And maybe, to be fair, a lot of people don't actually want to. Sure. And there is they're really bound to be a technician, and they're not necessarily able to detach themselves from the business and see it as the investment and as one of the vehicles to a greater ending and path. And there's a lot of ego, which I think comes into play in there as well, which makes it very difficult. But look, I definitely second that. And funnily enough, every business I've actually started, I've not started having done that particular discipline before, which is probably one of the blessings.
Exercise, right?
Yeah, which is probably one of the biggest the sort of advantages that I've ever had. So my immediate first response was to find some sales and then find the right people that could do it, or buy in because I wanted to get into something or otherwise. So construction, IT businesses, even the marketing business that I now own and run completely, started by me being a manager and an operator, or not an owner from mindset, not an operator that is sort of married to the skills and output. Which gives some incredible insight, because you come from a different angle and perspective at all times. So
that helps you craft out a unique niche in the market. That I find that if you've been in an industry for so long, you get boxed into the mentality of how everyone does things. And you always get the best ideas and the best fresh perspective from your newest people. Or if you've had somebody that completely comes in from another industry and says, oh, why do you do things this way? And you've probably never even thought of it before. So you've got a leg up on that one.
It's amazing how we do silo in those industries. And certainly that's right. I would walk straight into a new type of operation and just think, well, these guys do it like that. I mean, has anyone considered this? And it's like, no, the whole industry's done this forever.
And it's like, right. Why would we change?
Right, okay, well, how about we try it? Sure, and it's that type of insight that you can bring in, and like you talk about leveraging and adding value to a business or bringing a different value proposition. That's sort of what I've achieved and been able to achieve as I've moved into new industries. I see businesses as numbers and bits as structures, and all very similar. And I think more investments and that's the approach you look at, with what you're doing as well. And I think we all need to take a bit of emotion out of it sometimes.
Correct.
Despite the fact that we're very passionate and clearly need to be about our businesses, right?
Yeah, look, I found it difficult coming from the technician and transitioning to that manager or leader and then eventually entrepreneur. But I guess the motivation for me is that I reflect on the likes of Richard Branson, right? You don't see Richard Branson in the Virgin store like selling mobile phones, right?
Sure don't.
You don't hear him on the PA flying the plane, right? Saying that there's blue skies, blue skies coming into Sydney, right? He's the El Capitano, right? So, and he knows that position inside and out.
And he doesn't do it from an office either, which I've always found, really inspiring, that he's able to do what he does from where he does it.
Exactly right. So that's always kind of been the inspiration for me to kind of keep pushing the pace. And look, you've always got that temptation that you've onboarded a new staff member and they're not quite at the level that you feel they should be at, to step back in and just take the reins off them. Yeah. But by doing that, you're impeding their ability to grow and learn for themselves. And I guess I was in their position once before as well. Awesome. So it's just about kind of trying to nurture them and stop trying to, I guess, have that temptation to dive in and take over myself.
I love it. All right, well, look, thanks very much for your time.
Mate.
It's been awesome to have you here. So if people want to find out a bit more about yourself, Yellow Brick Road, the Wealth Mentor.
The Wealth Mentor,
where's the best place to go and find out and connect with you?
You can connect with me via wealth-mentor.com.au or via the ybr.com.au website, going to search for an advisor, or via LinkedIn.
Fantastic, and we'll link that up in the bottom. But no, it's been amazing having a great time here on Lombok, and really great chatting to you.
Good chat, mate.
Awesome.
Cheers.
Thanks very much. Hey guys, it's Matt here, and thanks so much for listening to the Amplify Your Business podcast. It means the world to me that you've listened all the way through, and I'd love it if you could share it with your friends, if you want to.